Hello, and welcome to another episode of Creating Cultures that Outperform. I'm Frank Wander. I'm the CEO of People Productive, and I'm here with my incredible co host, Terry Mays, who is a certified culture engineer. Today, we're going to be talking about the productive power of institutional knowledge. Institutional knowledge has been one of the most underappreciated elements of productivity in corporate America, at least during the last 20 years of my career. I saw time after time people with incredibly deep institutional knowledge replaced by somebody earning less who knew nothing. And that institutional knowledge had been gathered by doing work and learning over many years. And that is how you create speed of work, is people become very good and quick at what they do. That's institutional knowledge. And institutional knowledge is knowledge that can only be gotten working in that institution. It's not the standard industry knowledge that people can bring in. Every place has a way to get things done and to work. Part of institutional knowledge is obviously social capital, all those relationships you built, knowing how to work with the people you have to work with. Another part of it is knowing how to work with all the tools and systems there, even knowing how to log in, what's a security, where do I go to get stuff, how do I find things. It's a vast amount of knowledge that people acquire on the job, and it's given zero value because people are treated as expenses, not assets. As they learn, they're becoming an asset of that company. There's an investment being made in that individual, and that investment is turning into them having higher levels of institutional knowledge, being able to work better, perform better, work with others better, know their way around. It's huge. And no one talks about it. No one tracks it. This is absolutely enormous. And, Terry has a lot of real experience with institutional knowledge from working across companies. And Terry, do you agree with what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I think this is probably one of the areas that people underestimate the power of having worked in the same company for a while to gain institutional knowledge and the power of sharing that knowledge with other people. It's so important. I can't stress it enough. There's nothing more frustrating to me than to try to solve a problem that's already been solved or that
Yeah.
somebody already knows because they've been around long enough to know what things will work, what things won't work. And so you spin your wheels trying to solve these problems and kind of understand things that somebody else has already figured out. And that is just very frustrating, especially when you're a new person in the environment. You want to make sure that you're helping people avoid pitfalls. Don't allow people to fall into the same traps that somebody else has fallen into. It's just very frustrating and it kills morale because you have that person and you see them struggling. And someone that has the knowledge will hold on to that knowledge and not share it with them.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing to do to a person.
Oh, it is. And you see people
Yeah.
struggling all the time. And then you get into an enterprise or a company where a lot of people who had worked long to gather institutional knowledge were replaced. And now the people who are left with institutional knowledge, it's part of their survival strategies. They start to hang on to it. They're not as willing to share it because then they really don't have a unique advantage because it's not valued, but people are going to know this is a go-to person because, people go to them for answers. And they're going to maintain that situation, which means they're not going to share it, which means people are going to fall into the same pitfalls and traps that Terry talked about. You're going to have a very unproductive workplace, and you've essentially destroyed, the capability of the human infrastructure by being penny wise and pound foolish. Companies need to understand who are the assets, who are the expenses. I don't like calling people expenses, but if your big expertise is maintaining Windows Server 2013, you're an expense. Your value is dropping every single day. That's reality. And it's your fault for not catching up and staying current. Nevertheless, people are, for the most part, assets in companies. Some of them have incredible asset value because they have huge institutional knowledge. They've built tons of relationships. They can get things done very quickly. They're key influencers. And that's all part of institutional knowledge, knowing how to work with the people. And when it gets to innovation, it's even more important. Companies sit there going, we can't innovate. Well, nobody understands how everything works and fits together. So it's hard to come up with an idea by connecting all these things and what you could do with them. Steve Jobs said creativity is just connecting things. So the more they know, the more connections they can make, the more suggestions and ideas they can come up with. And this is one of the reasons companies struggle too. You just don't have people who know their way around and know how things work, fit together, and what you could possibly do with them.
Yeah. There are things that you just learned by being there. These aren't things that you learn in school, that you learn from being in other organizations. There's just ways of doing things that are unique to that particular company. And that knowledge can only be gained by experience and
Yeah.
through people sharing. So you want to make sure that you've got some experienced people around that can help people through the obstacles of working in that environment, help people through understanding little quirks and idiosyncrasies about different systems that, just things about the systems that you learn just by supporting them and having been there. Maybe you were the person that helped design the system, so you know about all the quirks.
Yep.
There are things that you just can't teach. So you have to learn it by going through it and experiencing it. And then as you do that, build databases. So I've worked on teams before where we started sharing that knowledge through documents. And so when somebody would learn something different or they figure out how to do something, we'd write it down so that everybody had access to it and everybody could avoid that same pitfall. Or if there were things that were difficult to figure out, once the person figured it out, they would write down all the steps and store it in a central location so that everybody could get access to those notes. So nobody was interested in just hoarding all the information, but we wanted to make sure everybody had access to it. Everybody could share in that knowledge and not waste a lot of time. Because when you think about it, when you have people wasting time trying to solve things and figure out problems that have already been solved, you're spending money on that resource to sit there and try to rethink something that's already been thought out.
Oh,
That's
no.
effort, time, and energy that could have been spent on solving a problem that hadn't been solved yet.
Yeah. I mean, Terry, you're so right. I mean, the amount of time and energy wasted relearning stuff, resolving things, people going up learning curves to become an expert. I remember we had one very large, it was an old mainframe system, millions of lines of code. And to become at that fourth level of institutional knowledge, which is unconsciously competent, I mean, you're just so good, everything, you know your way around. Somebody asks you a question in a matter of seconds, you go, here's what you need to do. You've internalized the whole thing. Not many people achieve that level because they also need high aptitude, not just time on the job, but aptitude. They're really good at what they're doing. And so the combination of those two produce just enormous productivity and institutional value. But, people are forever learning their way around. I love Slack for that reason, where people can share stuff. You can have channels about how to do stuff, and they can go in and they can share what they know. And sharing what they know is a really, really big deal, because you want a culture where people not only are acquiring more and more productive knowledge, but you also have a culture where people share. Sharing is encouraged, people are rewarded for sharing. And then they're on Slack and they're putting stuff in the system so that other people don't have to relearn the hard way what other people have already struggled to, the knowledge other people have already struggled to acquire. It's just so obvious, but once again, zero value equated to these people and what they know.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that having this institutional knowledge in some shareable format so that everybody has access to it is it reduces that turnover where people feel frustration from having to do things and then have somebody later come back and say, "Oh, that's what you were trying to do? I know how to do that." Or, there's nothing worse than that. You find
Yep.
out, you think you've accomplished something and then you find out that people already knew it. So that can be very frustrating and that can cause people to leave the company because you feel
Yep.
so unappreciated and you feel so disrespected because nobody honors your time. Nobody realizes the frustration level that they've sent you down this path of, chasing rabbits when they've
Yep.
already caught the rabbits. They've already figured it out. So that can be a huge morale killer and cause people to leave the company.
Yeah. Oh, look, 100% agree. It is a real, real problem. So institutional knowledge is knowledge that can only be acquired at your company on the job. It's on the job learning. It's what makes your company different and better, hopefully. It's the source of the raw material for how you're going to innovate. You can get industry knowledge anywhere. You can pull it in. That's not going to create that real innovative differentiation for you. It's going to be taking who you are as an institution, a lot of that institutional knowledge and how you do things, what you've built, and making it better and more accessible, whatever the innovation is you're looking to do. So it is one of the things that really becomes a source of innovation. And it's just incredibly important to do that because, innovation is turning concepts into reality. The reality piece is taking what you have and building on top of it. And that's why companies struggle with innovation. They just don't have that institutional experience anymore. They haven't valued it. And then you have, the baby boom generation stepping out who have very deep institutional knowledge, moving on, being replaced by people who don't have much. And companies didn't methodically do the turnover of knowledge from the group of people who had it to the new group coming in. It's another gap. Everybody just lets shit happen, right? Let them go. Everybody will figure it out. It's a very costly way to run a business, and it's not competitive. And ultimately, it's really not healthy as an institution or organization to run that way. It just isn't. You've got to value it. You've got to make people to aspire to acquire it. And you've got to really leverage it and, make role models out of people who've really got a lot of it because they're the key hubs in the place. They're the go-to people that everybody goes to when they want to know, how do I do something? Where do I go to find something? Hey, who should I talk to? All those questions. That's institutional knowledge. And those questions are asked by tons of people every day.
Yeah. There's a whole level of knowledge that's captured and shared. When it creates such a well-oiled machine of a working environment.
Oh,
So you got
incredible.
people that collaborate on higher levels because you all understand how things work. And it's not just one person that gets drained because they're the only person that knows. But now, because everybody knows, you can think about the process, you can make process improvements. Innovation
Yep.
becomes so much easier because now it's not just little pockets of information, but everybody has that shared knowledge. And you can begin to think about ways to make things better when you're all bouncing ideas off of each other. But if it's just that one person, they're just trying to survive because they're the only person that knows. So really take the time to share the wealth of knowledge with people because it really does make the organization better overall, not just alleviating the stress and the pressure that comes from being the only person that knows. You want to be a go-to person and a knowledgeable person, but you never want to be the only person that knows because that
Haven't
really
heard that.
puts you in a stressful situation. It's very stressful being there where you're the only one that knows. You can never take a day off. You're always on call because somebody has to backfill for you while you're on vacation. And then you spend your whole vacation on the phone trying to explain stuff to people and help them do tasks that you would normally do, all
Yeah.
because you hoarded that knowledge. So a good leader is always looking to reproduce themselves in others.
Mhm.
The same holds true with people that have that institutional knowledge. You're a leader in the organization. You should always be looking to reproduce that knowledge in other people. You never want to be the only person that knows how to do anything.
Oh, it's a disaster. And, one of the problems is when companies actually don't make sure that people are sharing knowledge and there are lots of experts around, then they do miss out on all these improvements that groups of really knowledgeable people can actually drive on their own. They have all the people relearning it, and they're losing all that value, which always, so really blows my mind. And, when you see these people who unfortunately end up being one of the few people who has that much institutional knowledge of the go-to people, they're never, given X amount of their time to help other people. They're given a full plate of work. And so they got to fit it in. As Terry says, it's extremely stressful when you're the go-to person. So you do need to share it. Companies need to make sure that information is being shared, that the knowledge is spread across the organization. That way people can get into a conference room, they can debate. When you start to acquire expertise and people come to you, hey, now you have a little more influence. That feels good. That's one of your achievement needs getting fulfilled. So you're creating a better emotional experience. People aren't falling into these, pitfalls that other people have already fallen in and solved. They're a go-to person because they know something, they have more influence, they can contribute more, they'll feel better about working there. It just really affects so many aspects of creating a healthy, high performing culture. There's no question about it. It's huge.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Tara, I guess we should let people know we're here every Wednesday at 3 o'clock. We have another show. You can subscribe to the People Productive channel on YouTube. You can go to the company page on LinkedIn. You'll see all the videos. Please subscribe to the company page as well. This information is incredibly valuable. Every week, we cover different human factors that drive performance of modern companies in this digital era. It's all about the people and the collective performance of the people. These are the human factors of leadership and collaboration. They all make a difference. It's not just about the leaders, it's about the relationships between the coworkers as well and how well they're sharing and doing things. So please join us every week. We look forward to having you here. We'll have another great episode next week, and tune in to find out what we're going to be talking